All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the Self-Doubt Solution with your host, the Freedom Architect, Mario Lanzarotti. I am super excited. Today, I get to interview a dear brother, an extraordinary human being, Jeremiah Dupin. He is a serial entrepreneur. He's gone through the nitty-gritty of really going from the very lowest point to the very highest point multiple times. He's been in the restaurant business. He's been in the coaching business. He's gone to the jungles with the shamans. He's had a very traumatic past, which, if you look at it, which we're going to do in a moment, many people, I'm going to say this, would actually be defined by the limitations that this past created. And Jeremiah has taken that on and has pierced through it, has distracted the wisdom from it, and has put himself in a very vulnerable position multiple times. I've seen that happening, just so other people can learn from his example. He truly is someone who walks the talk, and he can speak from overcoming addiction to regulating your nervous system after chronic illnesses, to creating inner peace and overcoming self-doubt and the major limitations that so many of us face on a given day. With that, welcome, Jeremiah. I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Man, this is going to be wild. I want to hear, because you and I we've talked a little bit, and for our dear listeners, Jeremiah and I have done a men's group coaching program together with Sacred Sons. Highly recommend the guys. They're amazing. And we've seen each other in action, and we've listened to each other's stories. And I had no idea that you had such a traumatic past. Tell us a little bit about where this entire journey for you kicked off.
Yeah, great question. So I've actually been able to distill that down a little bit more these past few months. It started out, I was about 3 years old. I was riding in this van with my mom and my late father at the time. And I was riding in the back seat, and I had unbuckled my seatbelt to get up out of the seat to go sit with my mother. And I ended up opening this sliding door, and I fell out and I hit gravel and rolled into a ditch at about 35 miles an hour, about 50 kilometers. And they thought I was dead, ended up getting me, pulling me out of the ditch, rushing me to the hospital. And it was about 2 to 3 years after that, after my parents' divorce, and my mom remarried. I was about 6 years old. I was then diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder and ADHD. It was put in psychiatrist offices, psychologists, pumped full of prescription pills. Because, my parents came home one day and they saw me just locking all the doors, all the lights off around the house. I'd washed my hands hundreds of times a day until they were so dry they bled. And what I really was able to kind of discover this past few months and make more sense of all these childhood traumas and behavioral disorders was that impact at 3 from that near-death experience was really dysregulating to the nervous system. Manifested more as these behavioral disorders, and then from there spawned a life of like addiction and these unhealthy ways of coping with that dysregulation and not having any awareness of it back then. So that would be a starting point to jump off from.
Yeah, and first of all, holy shit! I mean, yeah. That kind of experience, and then looking at you now, I want to ask you a question, because you and I were very aware of the terms and the terminologies that you've just presented. I'm curious, though, if someone isn't so aware, someone is, an entrepreneur, he or she is focused on building their vision and on becoming the best they can be. How do you know that you have these things? What are some of the signs that you had that later led you to that awareness that you have now?
Oh, wow. I love that question. I've never had anyone, look at it. It's funny. I was just I was connecting with this girl that's a good friend of mine last night. And that was the topic that we were on. It's like, hey, there's this whole world of people telling you, like, feel your emotions, right? Become aware of your emotions. And I'd heard it for so long, and I'm like, well, how do you do that? What does it feel like? What are they? How do you name like these? And for me, I've found that an easier doorway is to start to understand, who am I being? Like, how do I show up in relationship to other people? And so to bring it back to that question, it's like, I've noticed these periods where I was holding shame, right? Where I've made myself wrong for something bad that happens, then I hide from people, right? Or I react on them if I'm feeling bad about myself and I try to put it over here. Or if I'm sad, maybe I'll also hide, or I'm low energy, right? So for me, I was able to start seeing like these behavioral problems I had, these suppressed, repressed emotions over time were showing up in relation as reactive behavior, disconnected, not really knowing how to relate to people, to have shared intimacy. And it was just a slow unraveling over time. I truly believe that our disconnection with others and our feelings of loneliness and isolation, those things are symptomatic. They're clues to unresolved emotional trauma in our body. So that's kind of the best I could articulate at this point.
Mm. And you talk about addiction, right? And it's a big topic that you have addressed. And what would you say are like some of the signs that someone has an addiction? Because often what you see in the entrepreneurial community, you see this, I'm addicted to success. I'm obsessed with this. And I've become very much aware of my language. And I'm like, I'm not obsessed with anything. I don't want to be obsessed with what I'm doing. I'm not even obsessed with helping people, because to me, that's too much. It's like, I don't want to be enslaved by these things. So I'm wondering, what would you say are some of the common addictions that a lot of entrepreneurs face that they just brush off as sort of normal?
Yeah, a great question. So I want to also make this conversation more accessible for people. When I used to hear the word addiction, I would also tune out for so long. Let me give you this little backstory so it makes sense for people. I grew up going to AA classes with my father. My father was kicked out of his home at age 12. He was physically abused by all of his parents. I was also physically and emotionally abused. And so growing up in that environment of Alcoholics Anonymous from a young age and seeing my father struggle with it, I didn't ever want to be like my father. I didn't want to identify that I had, still don't identify as an addict, but I had addictions. And so with that language, it was inaccessible for me to look at the true nature of what was occurring in my life for so long. Eckhart Tolle talks about, we think, if you fix one addiction, it just manifests from one thing to the next. And so first is just slowing down and saying, hey, if the word addiction is not resonating with somebody that's listening right now, replace it with unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? Behavior patterns that are not serving you or holding you back, right? Just change out the language if it messes with you. I'm going to use addiction for simplistic sake. So for me, going back to the question, I to get grounded in what we're going to define as addiction is, and where I got the best view of it now is anything that kind of pulls us away from feeling our experience. Anything that pulls us away from the reality of what's occurring, mostly occurring inside of our body. I gave the example of like from a young age, I had these like physically traumatic things that had happened, things that were also happening in my environment from my parents' divorce, the physical beatings. And I learned early on how to dissociate from my body and move into external things that gave me a sense of safety and escape. I could focus on locking doors hundreds of times, washing my hands, and it pulled me out of feeling that internal turmoil. So as adults, especially as I got older, I learned how to then, get away from doing it from these like ritual things to then, drinking to numb that anxiety and disconnection I felt with others, having lots of sex with, manipulating women, trying to get my needs filled in these ways, overworking, right? All things that were helping me avoid that internal discomfort, disconnecting from my body. I couldn't feel it. Right. So and it can be food, it can be, binging on Netflix. It can literally show up as many different things on the spectrum, from hard addictions to very subtle, soft nuances. And so again, to sum it up, is defining anything that you're doing unconsciously, consciously, that's pulling you away from feeling what is going on inside. Disconnection over time keeps us away from our body. And then, that's what drives, for me, in my view, drives our physical illness, drives disease. And eventually, like you've heard, body keeps the score. You'll eventually listen, or your body will yell loud enough where you'll be forced to listen.
Yeah. That's and I like to share in this conversation, also like be vulnerable and authentic. Last week I was out of order for about 2 days and I realized something was coming because I have been working excessively. It's like still maintaining my meditation, my workouts, my eating healthy, all of these things. Yet I've been very single focused for a long time. And for me, what I was missing was a sense of joy and exploration, being in nature. And I have been denying myself that. And so then I realized, okay, this is coming. And here it came. Wednesday, Thursday, I was in bed. I was out. And I realized that this was happening as the result of what you were just saying, this excessiveness of going into one direction. And I was like, and what I learned in that for me was that, however, to listen to my body, right? And I did. And I didn't fight. I said, okay, I had plans. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to cancel all the plans. I'm just going to be in bed. I'm just going to do nothing. I'm just going to be there and be with it. And yet I recognize it's a pattern, right? It's this working towards, then I have 2 days off where I'm not going to do anything. And then I can continue doing that, right? And that's a pattern. So just also bringing in some awareness that it doesn't matter how much of the internal work you have done. This is an ongoing practice of recognizing these parts of yourself are there and they can come up. And it's your choice of what you decide to do with that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it sounds like you created the space to allow yourself to feel that further. You're having those couple days in bed, able to also now just reflect on it, look at it, integrate it. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Talk to me a little bit about nervous system. So this is a big topic, and I talk about this as well with my clients. I haven't really talked about this in a public sense, yet I want to know from you, what does it mean to regulate your nervous system? And why is that important for people like you, like us, high performers that have a vision that they want to create that? Why is that important?
Yeah, so where do I start with this one? I made a video a couple months ago. I was working with this lady, Judith Johnson, who she was referred to me by Albert, who founded Sacred Sons. And he shared with me, that she helped, Peter Levine get his work off in the ground early on, somatic experiencing. She's been in it like 50 years. And I see that she worked around the nervous system and the vagus nerve. So I flew out to her home for 5 days. And she's the one that helped me piece together this early childhood trauma from age 3 and how that showed up in the behavioral dysfunctions. And as I finished that work with her, and it was just new levels of peace I'd not felt in my nervous system, the work she did around the vagus nerve, helping me release stuck emotional pain, I started to reflect on that and look at, if I could go back and do everything over again, all the plant medicines and landmark and coaching and books and trauma therapies and everything, I would have started right with her first and foremost. And I tell everybody the same thing. I would have started focusing on the nervous system first and foremost. And here's why. We can learn these like little tools to breath work and so on and so forth to regulate the nervous system, right? You can go into ayahuasca, you can go to landmark. However, what happens is most people then go back into their environment that are not really supportive of that stuff sticking. And their nervous system goes back into a perpetual state of dysregulation. Now, another thing that I believe is not being talked about in terms of regulating our nervous system, but I'm going to use the term like let's just use it, healing / integrating our nervous system and everything that's happened, is that you might get these hits of relaxation after breath work and,
Yes.
right after a peak medicine experience. However, if the root cause of the dysregulation is not dealt with, right? Traumatic imprints that are attached, like very deep stuff from childhood, if it's not gotten out in a structured way, and or the other not often talked about, chronic illness is not addressed, people will continue to go back into the dysregulated states after time. And I say that from a lived experience. All of that work I had done and all these tools I had, I still missed, deep stuff that was that was going off with the vagus nerve. I had mold toxicity in my blood, which was amplifying the nervous system. And so even all the best tools in the world were not addressing the root cause. And so it's kind of just to paint a fuller picture there. There's regulating it, right? That's like giving someone supplementation, or I even say almost like the doctor for trying to treat the symptoms. And then there's going to the root cause, right? Uprooting any chronic inflammation, deep traumatic imprints that might need a lot of deep structured work with a professional. That's kind of the whole view I would look at it, and ways one can go about, let's call it managing it, for lack of a better phrase.
So let's talk a little bit about this traumatic experience, right? A lot of people have traumatic experiences. You were saying that you've experienced physical and emotional abuse, and among the near-death experience, and that has left a deep imprint on your subconscious mind. What does the healing process look like? Because there's so many people that talk about it in so many different ways. What would you say was it that got it out for you so that you don't repeat it again and again?
Yeah. Well, this is the work I'm going to be starting working with another coach to distill all of this down to make it more accessible. So I won't butcher it, but just know that I'm going to give my best way of kind of sharing through a personal example of how other people can cut the time down. They don't have to go around these circles, right? There's this big thing in the plant medicines. You hear a lot about plant medicines right now, and cold plunging and breath work, and I believe all of those things are great and they serve a purpose. And I see a lot of people that do these things and still have reactivity, still succumb to a lot of fear in their life. I've done the same thing, so it's no judgment. I can say it out of recognition, not judgment. And when I tell people, like, again, if I could go back and do it all over again to look at healing traumatic imprints, is I would find structured modalities like somatic experiencing, like this lady, Judith Johnson, who does psychoneuroenergetics. I would find practitioners that work directly with the vagus nerve, the nervous system, and the psychological imprints that have happened in one's life. And I would work that in a structured way, going back, clearing out all childhood traumas that you can see, adult traumas. And I would start there, because when that stuff is clear, it becomes very easy to keep the nervous system at rest and or to regulate it with those tools then, right? What I've seen happen is people that don't deal with the traumatic imprints and things that have happened, they might regulate their nervous system with some breath work, but they're then quickly dysregulated again when something happens, right? And then a lot of times, trying to articulate here is, we're in these, when we haven't truly healed the nervous system, whether it's from a chronic inflammation that's driving it, like mold, Lyme, other autoimmune issues, and or we've got traumatic imprints that haven't been truly uprooted, then what we're doing is we are living life from this dysregulated or non-peaceful state. And therefore, everything that we do is creating more non-peace and dysregulation. And so for me, the real juice of it all is focusing there first to get that cleared, to get to a peaceful state, so that what you create is then more peace in the world. Your life is a creation rather than a reaction. And so that's the best way I can articulate it right now. And I know that's a big part of my message, is to help people kind of pop and wake up to that, get out of the game of chasing all of these other tools and practices stuff, and get down to the core of what's causing dysregulated behavior, which then creates all of these reactive decisions and misaligned decisions we make in our life, and just keep us on this fucking huge loop of misalignment.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I hear you correctly, you're saying rather than first thinking about what is it that I want to create and then working on creating that, is first establishing sort of a base where you can arrive at a home that we call peace. And then from that place, then start creating. Because otherwise, if you do the opposite, you're going to continuously relive the thing that you don't have, or that you tell yourself that you don't have, which creates a lot of reactivity inside of you, which then creates a lot of the scarcity that a lot of people are experiencing. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. There's, some people will have a big vision and they'll just go after it. I did that. And along the way, then I got to see all the stuff that was unresolved, right? Until I decided to stop ignoring that stuff that was really unresolved, right? It was just going to continue to show up and cause me more pain, right? So a human being, you could, they can do that. They can go chase it, and it'll always catch up to them. So things that are unresolved and not faced will show up. They'll show up in our relationships. They'll show up in our business, how we lead. So yeah, it's slowing down. Like, are you willing to look and get your internal space cleaned up first? Right? Everything in your environment, your home, your internal life, get that all cleaned up, and then create from that space a peaceful place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. What does that look like mentally? Like creating peace. You talk about trauma. Trauma to me is, when I look at it from the mental perspective, it's like an unresolved situation. There's something that happened in the past that we're not at peace with. What would you say are some of the mental tools that have helped you to come to a greater resolution, to a greater sense of peace mentally?
Yeah. Definitely, there's this distinction and landmark you probably remember. I mean, it's one of the core ones. It was the first thing that I'd heard that helped me step out of a lot of decades of resentment and anger and pain I held towards my family. Was, there's what happens in our life, and then there's the stories we tell ourselves around what happened.
Right.
Lot of looking at that and getting clear, on what's true and what's not true. Where have I made up things about what happened in my past and held on to things? That was a kind of the first opening. In terms of practices, meditation was definitely also a start. I started out years ago. I'd say it was 2016, 17. I started meditating. It just went, nearly every day since then. And it just started out as 5 to 10 minutes using a typical app like Headspace or Calm. And it evolved to many different practices over the year, to all the way up, Vipassana, 10-day silent meditations. And what I've seen, over the years, that intentionally creating that space every morning to have meditation, to just like observe my thoughts, just to sit still, was a doorway to, deeper reflection, to looking at, why do I, where are these thoughts coming from? What's still unresolved? Why is this one continue to loop? Why do I, it just had me start to really reflect more on my life, rather than just continuing to make a bunch of decisions and not understanding where they're coming from. So yeah, meditation, landmarks work, huge, I believe. Some of the best stuff for the mental game. Those two components have been, super helpful. And working with, you've met Anurag, working with a close mentor who, taught landmark and was really powerful in the world of distinctions and shifting mindsets. I think, having a good mentor who can pass off wisdom, someone that you can trust, is also, a great thing in the headspace.
Yeah. So you mentioned landmark a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I've been there myself. And, just like you, I tell everybody, one of the most powerful experiences I've had in my entire life. And one of the things they talk about a lot is taking responsibility. Yeah. Now, a lot of people, when they hear responsibility, especially entrepreneurs, they're like, yeah, of course I'm taking responsibility. I'm beating myself up. right? It's my fault. I fucked up. So
Yeah.
I'm taking care of this. Now, I'm curious, what is your perspective on responsibility?
Yeah, I love this question. I see in the world of responsibility that, I've kind of framed it this way at this point in my life, that everything that's occurring in my life is that, I've got a hand in creating it. Right. I've went through, I had a partner, we just broke up for the second time. A lot of love for her and so many great lessons. We came back into each other's life again. And, in the end, it's very easy to blame, when relationships end and so on and so forth. And, when you're feeling the grief and the pain. And so even just looking at in the context of that, like a breakup, it's just like, where is there an opportunity to see where I created this? I had some success in business, in the business I built in Dubai. Also had a lot of pain inside of that business. I sold successfully. I reinvested in another business in the US and I went bankrupt. And it's like, wow, where did I create that? Like, it's not, it's easy to blame on the market conditions, like, there wasn't enough people eating there. Or, I didn't hire the right people. They weren't good enough. But that's all pushing the responsibility outside of ourselves. So I'm always looking as like, where was I a creator in this? And furthermore, in responsibility, whether it's relationships, whether it's business, even the health. I'll just give another example, getting mold toxicity in my blood. It's very easy to say, you know what? Well, that's because I lived in the house and the landlord didn't do this and so on and so forth. And I wanted to do that. But when I took space and had a health practitioner challenge me a little bit further, it says, look, I want you to take a closer look at what's gotten you into this situation with your health. I started looking at, well, let me go back further. Let me look at the 20 plus years of addiction. Let me look at all the times since I got out of the Marines in 2010, when I was doing a lot of ecstasy and MDMA and chasing drugs and partying and women, overworking out, beating my body down, foodborne illnesses. I was weakening my immune system a long period of time. And here I am. I created this. I got my body to this place. And here is one of the consequences. I'm responsible for that. And now I'm also responsible for getting cleaned up. I'm not inherently responsible. I have to choose to take responsibility. And so it's trying to give all these different areas for other people to start to see it: health, wealth, relationships, that we're creating our life all the time. And I've found that responsibility is a much more empowering place to stand. When we're blaming and trying to put it off on the external events of our life, it's very disempowering. It's hard to create change if we're placing the source of our life outside of us. So that's a small context. Sorry, not just a small glimpse I give of like how responsibility has started to live for me in all the ways in which I've looked at it.
I love that. And I'm right there with you. And I like to make things very simple, because I find that sometimes these concepts that we're talking about, they can be very overwhelming for people. They're like, what the fuck are you even talking about?
Yeah.
I'm already doing that. This is too much. Similar to what you were saying, addiction is like, no, I'm not an addict. What do you mean? Like, look at me, I'm doing fine. And to me, I like to look at the word and I just turn the word around. And responsibility means the ability to respond.
I love that.
Now, what I do, for instance, I ask, because I'm right there with you in terms of, I believe that our external world is a mirror of our internal world. So then I ask myself, where do I create the inner environment for me to get into a state of reactivity? Because the reactivity is what derails me from the path of responsibility. That's where I'm going to go, just repeating the same thing over and over again. And one of the things that I find very interesting is when it comes to people moving beyond their comfort zone, and I'm curious to your take on this. What has really helped me and the clients that I work with is when you're moving beyond, or when you're planning to move beyond your comfort zone, what your brain will do, your brain is a reference of the past. It will look into the past and it'll say, when was the last time I did something similar? How did that go? And oftentimes, if there's unresolved trauma, it's like, oh, that didn't go well. So don't do that. So now you're already having this vest of this you're wearing this vest of anxiety. And you're like, oh shit, you remember the last time? Mm-mm. So now when you're using blame, come on, or this whole tactic of like, just push harder, man, just keep going, stop being lazy, stop being a bitch, work hard, play hard, that mentality that a lot of people have, I find it does the opposite. And they may initially move outside of their comfort zone and get some results. However, then what you said is exactly what happens. Their past catches up with them and they crash. So I'm curious, how do you do that internally when you're thinking about doing something that's out of your comfort zone, something new that you want to try?
Before we continue the conversation with my inspiring guest, I have a very special announcement to make. If you're a business owner, I have a feeling you started this journey because you want more than just success. You want to live a truly abundant life. That means having a profitable business to fund the lifestyle you love and create a massive positive impact. It also means having thriving relationships with people who inspire and challenge you. Being mentally, emotionally, and physically healthy so you can have the energy to go after what you really want while truly enjoying the process. And being able to go on adventures that really make life worth living rather than just sitting behind your computer all day. So if you would like to be able to have this kind of abundance in your life, then I've just got the right thing for you. The Abundance Accelerator Academy is my new membership community where we host 3 monthly coaching calls that are focused on helping you improve your mindset, grow your business, and create the kind of freedom you want. There are also fun monthly community growth challenges that help you build new success habits which you will need to access greater levels of abundance. All of this and more for just $69 per month. If this sounds exciting to you, visit www.abundanceupgrade4.me to learn more. And now, back to the show with my inspiring guest.
That's a good question. I'm still discovering that. I just want to back up 1 second. It's okay.
Of course.
I'll link it in. So in this responsibility to lead, you asked this question is like, what does it look like? Paraphrasing, what does it look like? Right. And so one thing I want to leave people with to further increase their responsibility or to make it easier. There's this thing of like, especially in the world of relationships, which I love supporting people getting complete, you can use other language like finding closure with people from their past or present, just bringing peace to all their relationships. And the one way I found of being really responsible for that is to really get clear in all the ways we've been responsible, to write that stuff out of our head, to put it out on a piece of paper, all the ways I resent this person or situation, where I'm holding on, where I'm angry, all the ways in which I was responsible for it occurred. And then to be witnessed and sharing that with somebody you trust, somebody very close, like, hey, this is what I did to this person. This is how I showed up, to clear that energy here. And then lastly is to then take that out to the other person and to make amends. It's nothing to do with them or the situation. It's all about owning our part, right? And that helps us clear the energy that's here, be at peace, have amends with them. So that's one way I found that's just highly effective. Helped a lot of people go through that process to be responsible, at least in the terms of their relationship. Now, what you were saying here, how do you overcome these situations, not wear, let me paraphrase or reflect back what you're saying, is not wear this like vest of armor after something's bad happened. Is that what I'm hearing correct? Like trying to protect yourself from anxiety.
So what happens is, and when you, let's say you've never started a business and the first time you're thinking about starting a business, then your brain will go into the past and will think, when was the last time I did something similar to starting a business? Maybe it's like, okay, when was the last time I did a theater rehearsal for my school play and I bombed? And it's like, and then my brain went like, never do anything like that again. So now you're doing that and you're standing in front of it and you might not consciously remember all this, but it's just super uncomfortable and you're like, I don't know. And then the mental conversation for most people is just get your shit together. This is not a big thing. Just fucking do it, man.
Yeah. That's the kind of leading with discipline and self-judgment and being hard on ourselves and just pushing through. Yeah. It's I haven't had it specifically in the context you were sharing. It's been in, I like to best share rather than like just share examples that people could see it. I dealt with this thing a few years ago when I was running this restaurant business. Okay. And I was one of the first businesses in all of Kansas City to go cashless. And it was a big thing to only take cards in the Midwest, a lot of conservative people. And I had a lot of people criticize, like, why are you doing this? It's a cash is a legal tender. You got to take it. And I'm like, well, there's places like New York where many of the restaurants are already cashless. The world's going this way. So after about I caught a lot of flack here and there, but I stood by why we were doing it. It was better for our employees, less chances of getting robbed. It's better efficiency for the business, so on and so forth. So after about a year of that, I had made this post on Facebook for our business, and somebody just happened to bring it up again. And I went into this place of like reacting, defending, on the comment, not like anything harsh, but I was like just it was coming from a defensive energy. And they took one of my statements, out of context, and they went and ran with it. It was along the lines of, the reason we're not going to not go cashless because people don't want to pay their taxes. There was this whole thing around people would come into my restaurant, and I'd ask them, the ones that didn't have debit or credit cards that only had cash. And I would often ask them like, hey, is there a reason why you're so against this? They're like, well, I'm in the service industry, and people in the service industry, a lot of times we don't have bank account. We don't want to pay taxes on our tips. I was like, okay, so you guys don't want to pay taxes. That shouldn't be a reason that I can't go cashless, right? Because you don't want to pay taxes.
Right.
And so I'd made this statement on Facebook, in short, saying, hey, look, a lot of the people that I've talked to don't want to pay taxes on their cash, something along those lines. And boy, they ran with it. Local news channels got on it. They were coming to interview me. I was getting hate. They were smearing my name all over. I made Vice News, like worldwide, 7 million people in their publication. And later, like a year later, I was in some global magazine publication taking the words that I said completely out of context, right? And that whole experience was very traumatic for me. It was very tough to see the hateful things, people saying I'm discriminating against Black and poor people, like just horrific stuff.
Oh, wow.
And anyways, I remember Anurag, like, he had coached the founder of Lululemon. He'd helped a lot of people go through these type of things, getting their name smeared in the media. And I just remember how hard it was, and how I started to slowly over time use my voice and voice less on social media. So it's kind of tying back into here. And so, this was 3 or 4 years ago. And, now, there is still that times like when I share something online, am I just gonna like, oh, just fucking share it? It doesn't matter anything, just not to be hard on myself, but it's like, oh, there's still a little of that residue. What if I put this out and somebody comes and takes this one out and they chastise my name? And so for me, the best way I found it is just kind of a loving kindness with myself, like a little grace. Like I learned to stop, slow down, like feel it as I can talk it out here, share more of it, let that old past diffuse. The second part, and so just little steps like building new neural patterns, reminding myself that it's safe, like I can handle other people's upset, right? The second part of that does link back to the nervous system. How much peace do I feel inside? How confident am I in myself? Do I have the tools to, deal with any backlash that comes and know that I'm going to be safe in here? So like, people's words may hurt, but, I can deal with the storms of life. So it's kind of twofold for me. It's definitely not in the world though of like being fucking hard on myself and pushing through, like that stuff doesn't work. It's just masquerading and coming up. And the stuff that's created, the expression that comes from that being hard on our space is tainted with that energy, right? And it might not resonate. That frequency is going to be coming from that harsh judgmental place. And so it might only resonate with other people that are on that place. Right. So that's kind of the best I could formulate and articulate that with a story.
Yeah. No, you've answered it very well. And it resonates with what I'm sharing a lot with this, especially what you said about giving yourself, I'm paraphrasing, giving yourself love, saying, I'm safe, I'm safe. And this was such a big insight and breakthrough for me to realize that psychological and emotional safety is a high contributor to healthy levels of high performance. Because in the beginning, I thought, well, this is some like a weak things like, what do you mean like safety? I don't need safety. I got this. I'm powerful, And just like you were saying, it was just covering up. It was just covering up for the deep insecurity that was already there. And the way that I explain this to my clients is like in my home, I have two pictures of myself, younger versions of myself. And there's a version of myself that is a little bit more chubby. And I used to feel very ashamed about that version of myself for a long time, not talk about it. And now I have it there. And multiple times during the day, I send this version of me love, because this version of me is still alive and well inside of me. And so whenever I have these, sometimes still today, when I notice I'm in a lower state, and then I, take off my shirt and I look at my body, I'm like, the first thing that I do is like, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're safe. I love you. You're good the way you are. And then if there's deeper things, then I go look at that on a deeper level. And then the moment to moment, it's this appreciation, it's this being with what is. And I gotta say, it's helped me to consistently perform at a very high level for a very long time, and not do it at the expense of my health, not do it at the expense of my joy. And that used to look very different.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. There was just as you're talking, I was thinking all the times like, it was just hard on myself, beat myself down, self-critical, and driving from that space. And just to hear you that you've also learned that stepping out of that and like first learning to come to acceptance and peace right here, then allows more fruitful, aligned, peaceful resolve to come towards whatever it is, that you might want to create from that place, rather than just driving from these old habitual negative thought patterns.
Yeah.
There's a really good quote that I'll have to find it later, but give me 1 second.
Yeah.
I wanted to read it to you, and I think I might, give me 2 seconds here.
I'm sure it's worth the wait.
Yeah. There it is. So it's along this lines. It's from Werner Erhard, who founded Landmark. It says, "I'm not proud of the way I am, nor am I ashamed. This is who I am. I've learned to accept myself as I am and not try to fix myself. Most people are horrified when I say that, because they recognize we can all improve, and therefore I ought to be interested in changing myself. But I'm not. I spent more than half my life working on changing myself, and I got very successful at it. Man, I really knew principles of change. But as the old French proverb goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I've learned it's more empowering simply to accept yourself as you are, not narcissistically loving yourself, but a simple being at peace with yourself. When I'm able to be fully responsible for the way I am, without justification or rationalization, new possibilities for being come into existence. I find myself growing naturally without effort." Werner Erhard, founder of Landmark. And so it's like what I hear is like, oh, I'm going to stop, even look at my body. Maybe it's not where it needs to be. Like I didn't get to get in the gym for a year with that chronic illness. Oh, just learning to accept that this is where it's at, rather than being at war with myself and further perpetuating pain and disease.
And this is so good. I love the quote, and it's the essence of the work that I do, because I did exactly the same thing that Werner Erhard did for the longest time in my life. And the biggest realization I had, and which, before the conversation started, the podcast started, you and I were talking, I went to Peru in November of last year. And this was still coming from a place of like, what's the next big inner mountain I can climb and overcome, so I can tell and show everybody that I'm the biggest, baddest motherfucker, and I'm like at peace. And it was all coming from hustle. And then I was there, and I got the bill for it, and it was slightly traumatic, the experience, because of the environment, that we were in, insects everywhere, very low standard of living, lovely people, amazing work that they're doing, not blaming or judging that. Just for me, for us, it was too much. It was just too much. And I will remember the moment where after I drank the medicine and I had purged, for those of you that don't understand what purging is the part where you puke. It's usually like certain emotions that are coming up, and it's a cleansing process in the ayahuasca ceremony. And I was just totally stripped naked. I mean, I was just like, I can't. I was totally overwhelmed. And all of a sudden, boom, Jesus. I had Jesus come to me. Now, you got to know this about me. I'm not a religious person. I've never read a book about Jesus. To this point, at that time, I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. I was more like, yeah, okay, great. I believe in it, but I'm not really connected to it. And he came to me, and I went into this infinite amount of bliss and love and joy from this terror that I was just experiencing. And the message was, just be it. Stop seeking. Just be it. Stop seeking. And I was like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. It's like the whole time I've been masquerading, trying to, masquerading this inner process of growth with this covering up for this deep insecurity. And I was trying to become something. And I was like, well, actually, all of the abundance teachings say the opposite. They say, be what you want to be. And to your point, I find when you accept yourself or your surroundings, you come to a greater experience of peace. And with that, it just happens to multiply itself. And all of a sudden, the things that you say you want that will give you that peace just happen to become so much easier in the creation of them.
Yeah, 100%. I want to build upon this, man. This, and bringing it back into this world of safety, peace, and accepting ourselves. I assert that a lot of people listening to this, people have dealt with shame, right? They understand. What you were talking about, just started to come to realize this past year. When I was going through this chronic illness of mold toxicity, my nervous system was really amplified with a lot of the toxins that were affecting it. And it was left in this state, especially after 4 rounds of antibiotics from those rounds of strep throat I had prior to it. My body was really beat up. Nervous system was really amplified. And therefore, my mindset was like, something's wrong. Like, there is something wrong with me. And I was finally able to start to see, because I had more awareness this time around in my life, and I created a lot of space to heal from this, that I've driven a lot of my life from there's something wrong, something wrong with my life, from a lot of the childhood trauma stuff, being made wrong in the home, religious upbringing. Well, I took that as learning how to shame myself over life. If something's wrong, and then going out and fix myself. And it's just loop, right? And I see how all of that is also linked to the nervous system. Safe. If we're feeling safe and rested and peaceful in ourselves, that we don't feel like we're under threat. We don't feel like our life's under threat, our relationships, our finances. We just feel that there's this sense of peace and well-being. We're way less likely to go out and try to fix and change ourselves or think that there's something wrong. And so I see that there's both a mental component in being able to be aware of that and see it, and it's just so inextricably linked with the state of our nervous system. No matter all the landmark work, like I talked about doing earlier, and getting these distinctions and coaching and stuff, if the body and nervous system is still saying, hey, something's wrong, way more likely to continue down some of these paths, like we see where the personal development world becomes, you get sucked into the capitalistic nature of it. The next course and the next and this, and it's all just habitual as a reaction to that. Something's wrong with me. So safety first in our own body, to me, is super paramount at all levels.
Totally agree with you. And also second what you were saying in terms of focusing on the body and really getting clear on where is the state of my body. Am I living in an inflamed, reactive, stressed out state that is continues to perpetuate itself? Because, there's a saying, you can never think greater than how you feel.
Yeah, I
You
love
can
that.
have the most enlightened mindset in the world. Just like, I consider myself have a very strong aligned mindset, right? And yet, for instance, last week, my body was in pain. It was like my joints, I had a headache, fever. They don't talk to me about mindset work
Yeah,
at that time. I was miserable. I was like, fuck you. I was like, I want to
yeah,
watch some Game of Thrones. And then first I shamed myself. Oh, but I shouldn't be watching Game of Thrones. It's all about killing each other. And so I was like, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm gonna just enjoy that. And as I did that, I could see my body just go,
yeah,
relax. And
yeah,
2 days later, I was back in my power. I'm good. So
yeah,
I totally agree that you need to create an awareness of what's going on. And I think people that have a sort of a hint that there's something off in their body, I highly recommend reaching out to Jeremiah, because he really knows what he's doing. And more importantly, he's been there. I find it so difficult to trust people these days that have this study mind. Yeah, I read about it. I'm a doctor, I'm a PhD, but they've never been there. And
yeah,
I don't trust that. So I really love what you are bringing forward to the world. And I want to ask you two more questions.
yeah.
One is, I'm really curious how you see this. Now, you were talking earlier about the environments that people go back into. You can do all of the inner work,
Mm,
you can do the landmarks, the ayahuascas, the coachings and whatnot. And then you go back into certain environments where there are with certain people that have a certain mentality where their behavior is very toxic. Like, how do you deal with that? Do you
yeah.
just say sayonara, or what's the way for you to dealing with that in a healthy way?
Yeah. Let me broaden environment a little bit. So environment, yes, heavily made up of people, culture that we're in, right? Conversations we're having. Our life is a series of conversations, you could say. They're made up from the conversations of the people in our life. It's also the access to food we have, our living situation. Some people might be living in a moldy home that they can't get out of. Like, it's really toxic to their system. The access to light, maybe warm weather, sunshine, like, to think of it, the broader environment of many of these aspects, right? So, where this really started making sense, I pass a lot of credit on to my mentor, Anurag, is look at, a lot of people want to think that psychedelics and these things are the answer. It's this big cure-all. But even Landmark, the reason he left coaching Landmark is because he really got over time is these people are coming from these big peak experiences, these aha moments, but then they're going back into environments that don't support helping them integrate it and actually living and showing up in their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And so when for anybody that's listening, let's say you're going on a retreat or you're going to do a course, whatever it might be, this peak experience you're going to have, the question I always ask people is like, how is your environment going to support that actually living on in your life? Because if you're not asking yourself that question, then you're setting yourself up for that experience just to be another addiction, another peak high. If you're dealing with people, like in your environment, let's say you're in misaligned, I don't try not to use the word toxic relationship so much, but a relationship that is misaligned where, you and your spouse or your significant other are fighting and yelling at each other. Neither of you taking responsibility, or you're going to a job that, your boss is out of integrity, or you're having to do things that are not in resonance with your soul. Let's say you're living in a town where you don't have access to good quality foods, right? I go on work trips sometimes. I'm in these small cities and I can only stay for a little bit because there's not good quality food access. What are these things in your environment that are pulling you away from really making the change that you want to make in your life, right? What this group of friends that are drinking all the time, but you're over here trying to get sober. What kind of books, what shows are you watching? What are all the things in your environment? And can you really be honest with yourself? What's aligned and what's not aligned? It's not making it right, wrong. It's getting it out of the language of judgment, bringing it back into the words of what's effective, what's not effective, and being willing to look and design your environment so that it's going to support whatever work that you endeavor on, right? That is what's going to have real lasting, integrative change in your life. These new ways of being that you want to create in the world, that you see about yourself, that you're trying to pursue. So yeah, looking at that environment from a real wide angle and seeing what's effective and non-effective, and just, being honest with yourself about it. And if you're not willing to do that, then at least be honest that, hey, you're just chasing something. You're also just chasing another peak over here. Just being clear with ourselves.
Boom, 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 boom. Wow, I love that. That was a really good answer, and it encapsulates so many different aspects of what you were saying. And I can, from my own experience, as people are going through that shift in environment, you might encounter a sense of loneliness, and
Yes.
that's okay. And know that that's part of the journey, or it can be part of the journey. Not saying that every single person is going to experience exactly that, but I love what you were saying, and really taking a hard look at your environment, at the kind of people that you're around with, and are they conducive to this vision that you're living into? Like when you're going into this retreat, seminar space and coaching, you're going into a radical transformation. There's the ideas that you are receiving there, they are radical. Just one idea that I often offer to people is like, self-love as your default, not as your reward.
Yeah.
That's a monumental shift with two different worlds clashing together. But then if you're going back to a world where, maybe your partner is doing the opposite, maybe your parents or your work environment, you're always going to feel like the one who's doing something wrong. Like you're going to question yourself, and there's going to be a lot of doubt that you encounter. So I really appreciate what you said about really becoming conscious of your environment. And I have one more question for you that I always ask all my guests, and I'm really curious what you're going to say. If you could spend an hour of time with any person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, wow. Any person, do you say dead or alive?
Yeah, dead or alive.
The one person that just popped up, which I this is just random. I've never actually sat and thought about this question, but for some reason Martin Luther King popped into my head. That just a pivotal point in our history. And I just think about the tiny little oppression I had in relationship. I shared the story about people destroying my name over going cashless. This guy created a revolution around, who we are, people's skin color, like equality. And so just seeing the degree and how I handled like that, and how it impacted me to get this person's world who went through, just something unexplainable, and the shift that it had, for a nation now that's, 300 plus million people. I would love to just sit with this man and hear his wisdom, and how he alchemized any pain that he was going through, and how he was able to keep his energy focused on, who he was being and what he stood for. There's something else I'll tie into it. My mentor Anurag always gives us, he was doing this thought exercise with himself one time, and when he was working with Landmark, and it was this whole thing around like, if you have more money, can you make more of a difference in the world? And was trying to pull that apart and find where it's false. So anyways, he finally did, and, began to look at it. They have people like Steve Jobs and Tony Robbins, Bill Gates, right? These people have a lot of money. But you also, are they making the level of change, though, that people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Mandela, who didn't have a lot of money, right? And so I find it fascinating that they all, Martin Luther King wasn't this like super wealthy person like a Bill Gates, but it was who he was being and the stand he took in life. And so I just really admire that impact, and that's somebody I would really love to sit down with.
Beautiful answer. and also love how you weave into the impact through your example, through your beingness, which really resonates, because I was just reflecting as you're saying, there's like, yeah, it's like I haven't had a lot of money compared to, like, millions, hundreds of millions, and
Yeah.
yet I've made a lot of impact on a lot of people's lives, some thousands all over the world, just by being me. And
Yep.
and I think it's a very refreshing answer. And to a lot of people, I think it inspires and instills a lot of hope, because they're like, yeah, but I don't have the money. I can't. I wish I could build the school in Africa. I wish I could start the mentorship academy in Vietnam, whatever, right? And you're saying, no, just be that change, breathe, walk that change. So I love that. Jeremiah, I know that you have an offer for people to have a conversation with you. And I think everybody listening to this interview should capitalize on this opportunity, because talking to you is a treat, is a gift. You're so full of wisdom and have such a rich experience of life. Can you maybe distill that a little bit more as to what someone might gain from talking to you?
Yeah, I first went to my mentor Anurag because secretly what I really wanted was to scale my businesses to make a lot of money. And I also wanted to bring transformation and personal development. And he wasn't up for that game anymore of just helping people make millions and billions of dollars. It was about creating heart-centered, purposeful businesses. And so eventually I had to learn a lot of hard lessons of letting go of my attachments. And so now, I also like to work with people in the sense that people can come for anything. And what I'm really up to, though, is helping people see where their certain attachments, their ways of being, their behavioral patterns, their addictions are stifling what their heart truly wants. Right. I have a real knack and I'd say a real gift for listening to people in such a way and being able to reflect back and challenge them and help them get their lives into alignment, to be able to show them in a very direct, compassionately confronting way where they're holding themselves back. And I really like to work with people in a very non-linear way, meaning, I'll give you an example. Some people might want to say they want to lose 50 pounds. By the way, I used to teach fitness all over the world for many years. And they might want to attack it by just going to the gym and putting in more hours and cutting their food. And I would take a completely different approach, not only in the fitness, but in even if they're wanting to build, make more money, is we're not going to just look at that direct path. We're going to look at, what are the ways you're feeling? What are the type of things you're engaging in your life that are actually not in resonance with your soul? And helping people make the connection, like, this is how your energy is being drained, right? This is why you don't have as much money as you'd like. This is why your relationships are suffering, and helping people make those connections, and then showing them that you can really perform at a much higher level. You'll have more peace. Your sleep will be better. You can lose that weight you want by going some of these nonlinear approaches. And so my gift a lot is in the listening, right? Being very direct and confronting with people, and then holding them accountable to what they say they really want in life and showing them how they can get that. So that's I can boil it down in about a minute and a half.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's very precise. And again, I highly recommend people listening to this take this opportunity, really connect with him. He's a beautiful man. He's got a lot to offer. Jeremiah, where can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, you can ridethewave.io. It's a website. It'll link you straight to a calendar. You can book a discovery call with me, see if we're fit, if I can support you in any way, and at least just make a connection. Be happy to connect and meet people. And same thing with my Instagram, ridethewave.io. I'll be putting out a lot more content here over the next few months. I'm starting to just build this off the ground at a larger scale. So
beautiful.
Thanks for having me here today. This has been great to connect with you, and love this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for spending your time sharing the energy and the space with me here today. Thank you to all of the listeners. I will be posting the links to Jeremiah's contact info into the show notes. And with that, I'm complete. Thank you for being part of the Self-Doubt Solution, and I'll see you on the next episode. Peace out.